Great. So again, welcome everyone. Our 6th edition of KQLCafe. And we recognize that joining live might be a challenge for many, but we're happy with the numbers that we see of the YouTube views afterwards, also the length of the views, so not just clicking the video. So that's cool. And yeah, I see some familiar names. Jörg is joining us again. I'm in a good mood today, so I think I'm gonna send Jörg a KQL coffee mug. Well, actually, I can deliver it to him personally. Okie dokie. So yeah, for those of you who haven't seen, we have some bad news. Unfortunately, our guest speakers that we had planned today, Roberto, had to tell us that he can't join because he's ill. And yeah, shit happens. I hope you're doing well, and we'll hopefully find a slot for you later in the year. Maybe some logistics as always. Next month in July, we will have a little break, as I will be in beautiful Sardinia, Italia.
Nice.
Enjoy another 2 weeks of vacation.
And on the other side of the water in Spain, so we can wave.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, yeah. But nevertheless, we've you know, Jenny and I, we have both been busy, and we try to make the best and, you know, talk a little bit about anything we've been doing around KQL. We have some news, you know, that's coming out of the Microsoft security product lines. You know, somehow KQL related if you want. I mean, in the end, you know, even the new features that come out, you know, there's always a way how we can then approach those new features or get more data or more signals out of the solution. Typically means also that we can, you know, grab the data with KQL and do something with it useful. Maybe you, Johnny, what did you do in general, just to give our guests a little teaser of what we plan to talk about today?
So this month, I think the most of the time in KQL was with the ASIM parsers. I'm not sure if everyone heard of them already, but it's a good feature so that you can use several sources of information in the same manner. So later on, I'll show a bit about the network sessions ASIM parser, because that I was working on. And the thing is, you can combine multiple sources. So you have your Defender for endpoint, your Fortinets, maybe other brands of firewalls. And if you want to query or hunt on data from the firewalls, then the ASIM parsers allows you to combine those. So if you have an IOC for a certain IP address, or you see strange activity to port 4x8, then that are things you can use the ASIM parsers for.
Okay, yeah, that's actually something Johnny showed me the other day. I mean, you know, we all try to stay on top of all the developments, and this isn't something really new, but actually Johnny showed me this the other day, last week. I haven't come across that, so yeah, definitely a cool thing to see. So good. So I suggest let's kick it off, and we just start with the news. And for that, I've prepared some little thing. Let me see, where's my screen? No, that's not the one I wanted to share. Sorry for that. Hi there. Thanks for joining. It's actually this one. Okay. Go. So let me go back quickly. So what's new? Within Sentinel, we have, if we go to settings, and then we go to the Sentinel settings, and then we go to the EUBA settings. what's new, or what's actually in preview now, is that in addition to Azure Active Directory information, we now can also get our Active Directory information into Sentinel. So what does that mean? Previously, when you had selected Azure Active Directory, it would mean that the identity info table would get populated periodically. I believe it's every 14 days or so. To be honest, I'm not so well prepared, but I think it's like every 14 days it does a full sync. And otherwise, it would just sync whenever there's a change on the user object in Azure Active Directory. And you know that table is useful, for example, identity info. And in my little lab, I only have a few users, but you know it's useful because I have the user account name, I have the department name, I also get information about the group membership, and I also get information about the Azure AD role membership. Now that's so nice because if I run queries against tables, you know, and maybe I have the account UPN name, but you know, I wanted to also know whether Sam is member of a particular department. You know, that information would then come out of the identity info table. So I could join, you know, table A, where I have an account UPN name with identity info, and then I can enrich the information with, for example, department information or any information that I have stored on the user object in Azure AD. Now, since we also want to secure our on-premise environment, if you have Defender for Identity deployed, what you now can do, you can also activate Active Directory. And that means that now not only our on-prem AD synchronized accounts with Azure AD are made visible in the identity info table, but we now can also get information about the accounts that are not in the cloud at all and that are only, you know, living in our on-prem Active Directory. So once you have this enabled, and for that purpose, you know, I enabled this feature. I do, of course, have Microsoft Defender for Identity active in my little environment here. And then I went to AD, I created a local user. And if then I do the following, let's do I already have the command here, distinct source system. And let me go here. And now we see I have Active Directory, I have Azure Active Directory, and I have hybrid. Yeah. And what that basically means is that the source of the system, or let me be precise, the source of the change on that user object, you know, where it actually happened. So hybrid basically means it's a synchronized user account that is, you know, it has a source in local AD, but you know, we have visibility in Azure AD because it's synced, and that's what we already had before. If it's Azure Active Directory, you know, the account is a cloud-only account, speaking Azure AD language. But now we also have Active Directory. So if I go to identity info, and I will just say, you know, just show me anything that is Active Directory, I should now see my OP user, which is my on-prem user that I created. And we see, you know, we have an on-prem user. It was created. And in addition to that, you know, I also see here Active Directory. And we also have another attribute now. I don't know whether it was already there before, but it's called the change source. Yeah. Now I'm still trying to get my head around, you know, what it actually means. I still have to do some more testing and get a full understanding. But because what we now see is when we do distinct on change source, we have EUBA, we have full sync, Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and watch list. Yeah. So my gut feeling is that the identity info table is now basically, looking at various locations and performs an update. But as I mentioned, I still need to create some more samples to really get a full understanding into the inner workings. Nevertheless, good news is already, now we can correlate also our on-prem users as we now have that information also in the identity info table. Yeah. So yeah, give it a try if you have Defender for Identity enabled. One question I got from one customer, customers are always cautious about, okay, am I now going to generate much more data? Honestly, I doubt that this will make a huge impact on your usage. I've convinced one customer, hopefully I can maybe in the next show some before after, what that means maybe in an environment with 4,000 user objects that we already had in the identity info table, and what that means if we're now syncing all the on-prem Active Directory table. I guess the typical consulting answer will be it depends on how many additional objects we have and how much change there's going to be. Nevertheless, 10,000 records, 4,000 records, that is probably peanuts in terms of additional usage consumption when it comes to log analytics or Azure Sentinel data usage. So I doubt that this is going to have a big impact on your costs. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully next time more. If you already have more information or have been playing with this, let us know and share your experiences. Yeah. Good. With that, I'll hand it over back to you, Johnny.
Cool. So let's see. So share screen 2. So this month's working with IOCs. I was thinking of a way to use IOCs and also a bit of IOA to detect certain things. And one of the things I use to come up with new detections is the DFIR report. And what they do is they examine certain attacks and then create nice blogs about it. So in this case, it is a ransomware attack. And what they do over here is they investigate it, and they describe what happened. And sometimes they also share the indicators, and also they make a nice overview of what happened. So in this case, there was an IOC mounted, and after that, the user opened an ISO was mounted, and after that, the user opened the link file, and then the link file did register a DLL server. And after that, there was some recon happening. And the good news is recon is still happening the old-fashioned way, so they don't have any black magic or special tricks to do that. So that's an easy way to create detections on that. So if we go to our Defender, and let's get away. First of all, there's one of the parts was that they ran the AD find, and of course, if you look at your incidents or your alerts pane, you will see that there was a security testing tool. And let's see, it's in the alerts then. You have some this, for instance, the AD find. You have the suspicious sequence of exploration activities. There's also it's also getting detected as possibly rehook based on the actions. But like I said, we also want to detect it by ourselves and maybe create some custom detections. Or in the end, you can also hunt for specific activities if things happen more slow. So in this case, what I did is I ran the commands on one of my test servers. And let's see, what we'll do is we'll focus on the initiating process, process file name equals cmd.exe. And let's focus on the initiating process command line. And what's by as you can see over here, between commands are the actions described in the blog post. So for instance, if we want to know if someone did a net group domain admins, we can query that from the initiating process command line. But you can also, for instance, see that the file name which is ran is the net.exe or the net1.exe, depending on the commands you're running. And that way you can look for malicious activity. And then you can also, for instance, create custom detections about them. If we go to here. So for instance, if we have a discovery of a local accounts, modify the query. And then over here you can see I made a simple query about the device process events, where the file name is in the file name exclusions, because if you run net.exe, you always get a net1.exe and you don't want multiple alerts. And then you can use it in combination with net command and the user or the group or the local group. And that way you can easily filter. I think I've triggered that several times. In this case, I was working on the server one. So over here, you can see the recon actions. You can also, for instance, filter it a bit more to exclude certain things, because we, in a certain case, you might not want to see the /domain or the /dom, or you can also turn it around and just filter specifically on where the process command line has these, but also has any of these. And that way you can create specific detections for the attack. And what you can also do, for instance, is on the blog post we read that they had used the AD find to extract the specific case. They use it to extract all the imported information, and then they used a portable version of 7-zip to make a package and then extract that one. So you can, in advanced hunting, can also, that's this one. Now if we go for device process events, where file name equals AD find.exe, It's capitalized. Oh, that is one way to find it, but sometimes they tend to change the name. So you can also search for the file hash. So you can do a device process events where SHA-1 equals the SHA hash. But then again, if you modify the file a bit, or if you add a space somewhere in between, then the file hash wouldn't be the same. So you can check for other things. So for instance, you also have the process version info company name and the product name. Those are also values where you can search on. And if they make themselves easy, they won't change these entries. And
is there also an attribute that's something like the original file name somewhere?
Yeah, it's projects already. You have this one.
Yeah,
so if they've renamed it on that system.
Yeah, and what about, I mean, the file name could be anything, and like you mentioned, they could change it, but what about the command line that they run afterwards? Maybe that is a better indicator.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So for
Then
instance,
I'm gonna bring up a live challenge. I mean, with all respect to Joe, I mean, all his tools are great, and AD might also be used for legitimate topics. So how about actually creating a detection rule? If we know that this type of attack or those guys use exactly those 3 commands in sequence, could we actually develop a rule where we say, okay, we don't actually care what the file name is, but we care about the command line that they're executing. And if I look at your blog post, I think they're mentioning 3 commands that are being executed. Yeah. So of course now it will be interesting, whether if that is exactly the sequence. So are they now running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times that thing? And could I just search for where command line is F and output AD users, and I actually don't care whether it's AD find or whether they modified the file name or change the hash. And I could even narrow it even more down and say, okay, minus F, and basically, just look for anything object and an output. And of course, it could be still a legitimate admin that is executing this, who is piping the results into a text file. But I guess the false positive rate might be quite low. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you can do is, if you indeed search for this in just the object category word, or object category word is person, that's a good one, or the computer, because that doesn't have brackets. You can also create a detection for this one, but you can also encode it to base 64. And then you can create a list of worrisome command line items.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm asking myself,
yeah,
with all this behavioral analysis that we have, I mean, wouldn't Defender for Endpoint actually by itself detect this as a suspicious activity? Because just today I did some training on the whole Defender suite with a bunch of partners, and I tried to explain. I actually also demoed by running the Defender evaluation lab. But I mean, if you run a command once, the system isn't gonna cry about that. And if I still want to detect those things, I would have to create a custom rule like you're showing now. But I wonder if we would just, copy paste those commands in sequence, where's the threshold to make Defender start thinking like, this might look like suspicious activity, because like in Defender for Identity, if I run a net user group domain admin once, no problem. But I've noticed that I can actually provoke Defender for Identity by running a couple of those commands in sequence. And then you are most likely are going to trigger a suspicious, enumeration alert. Yeah.
So over here we have that there was an alert at 8:19:15.
Yeah.
And that's the correlation of all the good things I did together.
Mm-hmm.
So it does map it through each other. But this is because I did a lot of things at one point. But if you split it over an hour or maybe several hours, then it's harder to detect. And the things with your custom detections, it's the last mile. Defender detects so much, but this way you're getting in a position where you have your company's normal behavior versus an anomaly. And a company's normal behavior can be, it can differ. I know companies where maybe Mimikatz is a line of business app because they use it to get passwords of leaving employees. And
Really?
there are other companies which don't like Mimikatz a lot. So there's this is a good way to get the last line or the last mile.
Yeah.
So over here they related A-defined to Ryuk, which they tend to use a lot. And the other one was A-defined in combination with the exploratory commands, because I ran a lot of them in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see in timeline, and then we'll do related events.
Yeah, speaking about A-defined, you just reminds me of something. As you know, I have a memory like an elephant. If I read something once, I will remember for the rest of my life, which also sometimes can be a problem. But I know that Hui, our debug privilege friend, he wrote this very nice article and just shared it in the Teams chat, but you might do quickly, for those that look at the recording later, you might want to quickly open that blog post. And if you scroll a little bit down, this is about LDAP queries. And further down the line, we did actually document quite some A-defined related commands that you can use for reconnaissance. And then he's also going to talk further about, detection and KQL queries around that. Yeah. Just to add to that. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I just ran a couple of them in sequence the other day to prepare my, as I always call it, when I do public talks or demonstrations, I'd like to have a Defender incident dashboard that is like a rainbow, and not just that, ICAR alert. So one way to achieve that, in addition to running the built-in evaluation lab simulations, is to just run, a couple of those commands on a so-called victim simulation PC.
So he's referring a bit to the LDAP search, so that's right. No. Okay, so this is also in our timeline. Zip.
Yeah.
This is all DNS related. Okay. Okay, so this is more specific. Reorder. Okay, so this is also timestamps. Yeah, so over here we have the queries themselves. So that's cool. Nice.
So you mentioned the ISO mount. Is there a way we can actually detect that activity, like when I mount an ISO file?
No, unfortunately not. What I can do is a bit freewheeling, but let me check, because last week I was playing with this exact use case. Let's see. It's 24th. It wasn't that good to detect. But let's see. Custom range last Friday, I think about 1400. Until last Friday. Make it 1900.
No dinner.
And zip. Okay. I opened 7-zip. So this was the mounting. So that's over here. So let's grab that time frame. Search. Star where device ID equals where timestamp between date time 2022-06-04, and it was 15:30, I guess. 15:50. Date time. It's 2/4. I find this the easiest way to manually enter timestamps, because you don't have to do a format date time and stuff like that. And what now I did. So that's 15:13. This is Dutch time, so we do -1:14. That's good. Summarize counts by action type. The image loaded, and we have the PMP device. Okay, so we're in the right spot. Where type in image loaded driver load, and we have the PMP allowed. Let's see. In this case, I know this is the DLL which was ran, so sorted by time. So over here we let's do a reorder time stamp $table action. So we did have the PMP mount over here. Just stamp descending. By the way, you don't have actually to add the descending by default. It sorts it by descending. So we have the image PMP.
And I guess the information would be in the. Do we have an additional fields here or?
Here we have it. Not here. PMP allowed. Show more.
Yeah.
Okay. Because this line, this was the unpacking of the zip file which contained the ISO.
Yeah.
So after that should be.
And was that ISO, that zip file actually written to disk or?
Yeah, I downloaded the zip file.
Yeah.
And then unpacked it so you have the ISO. And then I mounted the ISO. And then after that, I clicked on the link which launched this DLL.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's see. This is the driver load video. Oh, you have this one.
Okay, driver section. Okay, and would that be consistent? That would be interesting to try out. Yeah.
Yeah. So well, it seems reasonable that if you launch an ISO, that it calls the cd-rom.inf.
Yeah.
So let's just take a small screenshot for later investigation.
Yeah. And then also the CD-ROM install ISO drive. It's that, what does it say? Driver section. So CD-ROM install ISO drive on the line. You know, if that's something that is always happening, CD-ROM install ISO.
Oh, well, what we can do is if we do a extend Parse, I think since it's already a string, should be able to do additional files string. Version.
Okay.
Dynamic.
It's funny when you do this CD-ROM install ISO drive in Google, at least you only get 2 pages, so that already helps.
Nice.
CD-ROM inf, yeah, looks like that's maybe related to that. System logs, okay. Okay, and then we get to CD-ROM inf sample source code from Microsoft. There we have it as well. So maybe, yeah, something to check, you know, if that's a common pattern. We could always look for if that is coming up, this CD-ROM install drive pattern, whatever ISO file you mount.
So and I have Okay. It should work. Yeah.
I think it was called additional field strings, maybe.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, man.
No problem.
Say driver equals rom.inf. And if we now do say where timestamp go 30 days. Okay, so
Okay, only once. Yeah.
but this should work.
Yeah. So do we also have information what ISO file was actually mounted, or just that he did mount?
This one, I don't think it contains any additional information, but this is the one we're looking at just now.
Doesn't look like.
No, this is just the plain signature. Yeah.
Okay.
This was the ISO's name also, but instead of the .zip, it was the .iso.
Yeah. Okay.
Now here I launched the. So this is the DLL in the ISO. So you think we got one step further, but still you don't have all the information.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if we do a search, make it plain, but over here say where star contains stop query .iso is better. You only have the device file events. Over here, the ISO got created. And then we don't have any reference as it was mounted or launched. And let's see. We do search. Yeah, so we only have the unpacking and then that it was mounted. So maybe we can do something with the scan operator to see if a ISO was unpacked, followed by the mounting, but
Yeah.
Hey, have you ever used a time window join? I put a link in the chat there. I believe that does kind of the same thing where you can look for multiple events within a time window. Maybe not something you want to tackle today, but something if you could look at.
cool.
I think the caveat to this is that they have to be in sequence. So they have to happen in the order you're looking for. Like you would look for the unzip, and then you'd look for the mounting, and then maybe look for the register 32 exe registering a DLL or something of that nature. But you have to look for all the events happening within a time window, like a minute.
Okay.
Oh. It's a cool idea. Zip.
Yeah. So this comes back like, whether you have this sequence, right, of suspicious commands that would run, let's say, within a minute, or even the opposite, where you could say, okay, if during an hour, you have this command, you have that command, and that command, which is unlikely to be a legitimate admin to do that. Okay, interesting approach. Never saw that before. We never stop learning.
Yeah, I've played with the samples they provided, but I've never created anything useful out of it yet.
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely potential here for sure.
Yeah. Well, by the way, get some feedback I gave once during, I don't know what call with Microsoft, like, sometimes it would be helpful if those samples would be less kind of academic or theoretical, but something you could run yourself, that actually is something you can relate to. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's add that to the list, Johnny, for next time maybe.
Cool.
See if we can do something with that.
And then one last thing I wanted to say about the DFIR report, because they have these really cool reports. And in the end, if you want to be a bit lazy, you can also, they have the link to the Yara rules and the other rules. Over here, they link to, for instance, Sigma rules. And they can also find IDs to create new detections. So, for instance, the A-defined one, in this case, from Sigma, from Florian Roth, they use these rules, and there they have a list of commands they use, so you can actually build more or less the same in Defender. So they use the subnets -f for the subnet parsing, or just the AD info. And they have created really cool detections on the Sigma GitHub. Over here, AnyDesk is also a common one. And there they created a detection which looks at command lines with ---- install, starts with win, silent, because they've seen that this is a common thing. That way you can also learn from other products and easily convert them, because it's quite readable. We all have the process names or file names. It's also one where you can look for specific items and also refer to quite good references. So for instance, they look at command line and they look at the image, or in our language, the file name. And then you can also play around with that in the Defender. So that's the IOC part.
Hey, did you use Uncoder IO to convert those to KQL, or do you do that manually?
I have to do it manually. I love to play around with the KQL. So in one of the other sessions, Alex showed the uncoder, but I like to test and to see what happens. And you can use uncoder, but sometimes it gets a bit lengthy. So for me, I'll rather do it by hand.
Okay, thanks.
So that's, and then you also have of course, the Yarrow rules, which are a bit harder to convert to Defender. Also, the tactics you can see in Defender, but I think the team is still working on to improve the use of tactics to be in the same as Sentinel, but that's something we will have to see in the near future. So that's the IOC part. And we had some KQL tools. I'm not sure if you had anything for this month for the KQL tools, Alex?
Well, not per se KQL tools, but I can share what I'm currently working on. Still not to a stage where I'm completely happy, but nevertheless, let me explain my problem statement and where I get to try. Well, I'm trying to understand better, how things actually work. So the situation is as following. In my threat intelligence indicators table, I have 1.7 million indicators. And I also know why, because I've noticed that I have a bunch of indicators, and I saw also in the tech community, I'm not alone, that I had configured the taxi connector. So let me maybe go one step back and actually explain for those, rather than jumping in the middle of a topic without actually explaining the context. So Microsoft Sentinel. And here I have my data connectors. I have my taxi connector. And if I open that page, I actually deleted all the existing taxi things I have. And this is a funny phenomenon that I have, because although I have completely removed all taxi imports that I had configured, as you can see here, I'm still getting data. As you can see here, I'm still getting data. From de-scanning shields, immersion threat, fish tank, cybercrime, abuse CH. And those are exactly, by the way, the taxi threat intelligence sources that we get from Anomaly that are free. Let me show you where you find that. Where was it? Here, taxi. And you follow this documentation. Here we go. Yeah, so you now have all the information. Connect Microsoft Sentinel to one or more taxi server collections provided by Anomaly. So I had done so in the past. I had registered this API route. I had the issue scanning IPs, entered the collection ID 150, and then as per the documentation, use guest to actually add them. But now the funny thing is that although I have disconnected them all, somehow this thing is still alive and kicking. So that might be a bug or something is wrong in my tenant. Of course, I'm running quite a few preview things. Nevertheless, the thing is, if you have that many indicators, you don't want to go by this and say, okay, I'm going to select them and delete them, because that might be an endless story in doing so. So even if I now delete them, I still have a lot of these shield scanning IPs. Let me go back to the abuse, ransomware IPs. Okay, if I look how many I do have of those, 123 that are active, right? So I try to understand, the correlation between this UI. By the way, I can't filter on, just show me what came in, etc. I just see the total, I see the alerts and the threat intelligence sources that are feeding my threat intelligence. So if I count this, in total, I see that number. If I go back to my retention, which is 90 days. By the way, that's also an open question I have. Is the threat intelligence table, will that also be purged based on my retention I have on my log analytics or not? If I look here, I have quite some records, also from DShield in here. Nevertheless, deleting via the UI is not an option. So what I did is to try to understand, okay, what actually happens with that record. If I do this one, I see, okay, I have active, false, and true. And I've noticed that if I start to delete here, that actually I get, multiple records, because this is not a database, as you can see here, when the same record comes in, but here we see, true, true, true. Oh, I have a false, because I actually deleted it. Now, let me jump into where I ended up. I thought, okay, UI is not going to do it. So we need to talk to the API. So what I do here, first let me authorize myself. Then I provide the information that I need. And by the way, before I continue with my code, let me show you that later. Okay, now I have populated my URL with my variables, and now I'm basically creating the body. Of course, I can do this nicer in PowerShell, but for the time being, and I say, okay, give me back 500, because there's a certain limit. So there's no way I could get back in one request all entries of the table. So if you have only a small amount, that might work. But otherwise I have to provide the body, and within the body I can also do some filtering. And in this case, I'm filtering on the abuse CH ransomware IPs. So I load that variable. And what I'm now basically doing is following, let's just look at when I retrieve that information. So if all goes well, TI data, we see here in the TI data value, I basically get all my threat indicators. If I do TI data, count, oh, that was for that, count, 123. Of course, that doesn't precisely align with what I found up in the table, which is also something, I really like to kind of go here and exactly have that record and find it back in my threat intelligence indicators table. Nevertheless, I get quite some few records back. And what I'm now doing is if I want to continue searching. Now, this is not going to work, so I have to make this smaller. And of course, I have to adjust that code as well. But let's say I just say I'm going to, pull 10 at a time. Let's do this again. And now I'm going to get this. And the way this works is, whenever I get also the next link back, I know that I have to continue because there's more data. So I do the following. I will basically, run this, and I will start using the API to delete my threat intelligence indicators. 40 are deleted. And it will continue to do so. And while I was, working on this, I first did it on a manual basis. Another thing I came across, I'll show you in a minute, that I kind of was unable to find a, when I ran the query in log analytics, I was unable to find this string. But when I have to talk to the API, I have to provide exactly that as the indicator to delete. So this is like the unique GUID that I can retrieve from the API, but this number is not visible in log analytics. So if I were to go to log analytics and say I want to delete that exact entry, I can't relate. What I see in log analytics is the description, but if I filter on the description here, I get many more records back. Okay, so he's now working. He, continues to delete here. We're now at number 90. We had 123 something, so he will, be finished in a minute. Let's wait for that to complete. 100, I think we had 123 or 32. I don't remember exactly. And 20, and I think we should be almost there. And then in theory, all my entries with, abuse CH ransomware IPs should be gone. Let's give that a few more seconds. Okay, why again 120, deleting. This is also funny when I do invoke REST method. I don't get anything back if I do invoke web request. I actually then get the return code back. And for some reason, he's now ending up in a never-ending loop because he doesn't go past that, which is interesting. Nevertheless, let me quickly switch back while that is running in the background and show you what I was able to reproduce last Saturday. So what happened there is I noticed that as I started to delete this, are we doing the same? Let me see, abuse CH, right, IPs, yeah, okay. So I see active true. Now this was way back, but if I go last 24 hours, you see false, and I see this number has massively increased as I start to delete entries. And at some point, I also noticed that if I now refresh this one, I actually managed, because I had deleted everything. But my big question is still, what is the look back that he's doing here? How many days? But as you will notice, okay, there are still abuse CH malware IPs, probably. Okay, now this is domains, which is okay. It's not the one we did delete. Oh, but you see, yeah, the abuse CH malware ransomware IPs is now gone from this list, right? So there's no active of those anymore, and because there's no active malware, this is what I thought. Hey, cool, this is what I can do. This is how I get rid of those issue scanning IPs. Although I might have to run my PowerShell for a couple of hours. I would have to update the code a little bit because, of course, let me share that as well. There are some bugs, or not bugs, but some missing logic. Because when I do this in the very beginning, of course, that this token is only going to be valid for about an hour, and I ran that script for a couple of hours as I was climbing up, and I was hoping to get near that 300,000 to delete it. So I would have to update the code and make sure that I refresh the token. But yeah, funny enough, I first probably need to clear that bug. For some reason, despite the fact that I have no threat intelligence taxi connector enabled anymore, I'm still getting fresh threat intelligence data. So I first need to solve that and be really sure that this, although the connector is is not active, that I really don't get any data anymore. Yeah. Which is yet another challenge, the threat intelligence indicator. That table is actually shared by other connectors. So if I would use, for example, also the threat intelligence platform connector, which I do have connected, but that one, I know there's nothing behind, but yeah, I could start disconnecting that. That was one that I used back in the days with MindMeld. So yeah, still wondering where I do get those de-shield data from, but it's well possible that the deletion of the taxi, yeah, maybe something is hung up. Nevertheless, I hope that in a couple of days I get a little bit smarter about that. If I now look at the count here, I have more records. And why is that? Because this is not a database, right? This is the log analytics is not like a database where you update the record. It basically, what I noticed, if I do this one, you will see that suddenly the number from true, the number of false active went up. But I still have 11 true, which is interesting. Although in the other view here, I don't see any, abuse CH ransomware IPs anymore. But that might have to do again with the look back time that I'm using here. So yeah, you see my problem. I kind of need to try. If the look back in this one would be 12 hours, it would make sense. So that's why I don't have, any true active indicators. If I remove this, we will find all those records, that are most likely, also now being deleted. 809 CET, that kind of makes sense. That is when I started my script, right? UTC, sorry, it's all active, false. But yeah, I'm going a little bit in circles, but you get my point. The objective is, that I want to provide a solution that if for some reason someone ends up with this high number of indicators. And the reason is quite easy, because what we are missing is a valid until, right? Because otherwise the threat intelligence database would, clean your records up itself if it's no longer valid. But because for some reason this import did not import a valid until. I've also tried to play around after a discussion with Johnny, instead of trying to delete, to update and say, okay, just add the date of today and then see if they drop. But there I had some problems with using the update API. Now, let me quickly share something throughout my exploration phase, what I actually did before I ended up writing PowerShell. That's the following: track intelligence indicator, Sentinel. Let's do this API. I don't want, okay, yeah, that's this one. And that's actually a cool feature, just in case you're not aware. So if I want to do this query indicators, when you read the documentation, there's this little button called try it. I sign in. And I sign in with my account. And what I now can basically do, I want to continue here. So I say resource group name. So let me copy that one. Resource group name. That's this one. And my workspace name is my MTP Sentinel. That's about it. And then I have a body. So let's do this as a body. Space that. And then I say run. And nothing comes back because there's no data. If I change this into quickly some Yield scanning IPs. Where am I here? I should actually get some data back. No. So yeah, that was my work. Kind of far away directly from KQL and just that close. So I'm trying to get my head around. So anyone watching this or having some input here, any feedback is welcome. Otherwise, I continue my exploration phase. And as always in IT, while you're after finding out one thing, you come across 1,000 other things that help you build up your knowledge and expand your knowledge in areas you haven't been before. Like on my journey, this whole paging of APIs, I'm not really a seasoned person that has done a lot with PowerShell and APIs interaction. So I came across this, okay, after 500 return values, there must be more. When you go out, you search for what other people do, and if you find the right words to search for in Google, then not KQL specific, but then I also learned how to loop through return values from API calls. So that was a cool learning for me, at least. Yeah. So yeah, that's it for KQL tools today. Yeah.
Cool. And I'll share my screen again. Share screen. What I wanted to show a bit today was the parse versus extract, because this month I was quite busy with parsing syslog and common security log data. So what I wanted to show quickly is how you can use both, because when you use parse, you can create a string. You can add all the items you want in a subsequent order. And with extract, you can use a single item, or you can use extract all also to export all items, for instance, all digit values from a string. And with those two, you can parse your data. So what I was doing, for instance, this is a WatchGuard firewall which I'm running in Azure. And I wanted to have some of the items. So in this case, what I wanted to do was to have the message ID. And so what I did, I was using parse and then syslog because it's in the syslog. And then with is where you want to start. And I started with the asterisk because with the asterisk, you say everything which is here before the double apostrophe is to be ignored. So in this case, I'm skipping this part until the double because I have it over here, and then the message ID. So that one was quite easy to run and to get the message ID. But then what you want is the next step was I wanted to see if the traffic was allowed or denied. So you have to allow and you have to deny. So you can try to add over here a space. So what you can do is, for instance, we have this part, but then we wanted to have the space, and then we say DVC action, and then there's a space behind there. Now, okay, so what's going on over here? Let's do it. Right. Now I have the message ID that we want. So we want to have that one, and a DVC action. Now over here you have the column is filled, but what it is that sometimes over here there was another value called FQDN something. So what can happen is that there's added some other values, or maybe the formatting is a bit off. So a better way to, in this case, extract the deny or the allow is to actually use the extract one. What you can do is you can use regex to set up these kind of queries. So you can set up, like in this case, I wanted to see deny or allow. And when you use this, then it extracts a field where it's allow or deny. So this is a way where you can extract specific commands. You can also use it for instance, if you have some firewall rule names in there, or if you want to do TCP or UDP. It's an easy way to extract a specific string from the string. And then,
okay, so just thinking loud, we were talking about the data transformation and ingestion possibilities.
Yeah.
So in theory, if I wanted, I could actually at ingestion time enrich this table by actually adding that extend command, right? Where I would say, okay, source and then extend and then like regex and add an attribute, so that when I actually use the data, I basically already have an attribute, whether it's allow or blocked, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So that's two options. You have the ingestion time transformation, which the team is working on, and you have ASIM. And I was working on the ASIM parsers in this case for FortiGate. And with ASIM, you can combine several parsers into one big result. Because, for instance, you have the ASIM for underscore ASIM. No. Okay, so I have my own parser of it. You have the ASIM network sessions. At the moment, there are parsers for AWS, for Azure, for Cisco Meraki, for tons of stuff, and they are worked on to be more of those. And then you can combine all those with the ASIM network session. So if you run this parser, then you can query the results of all these parsers.
And how do I get, just let me play quickly, the unknown user. So when I have my existing Sentinel, do you already have those ASIMs automatically deployed, or do I have to do something?
There are some by default.
Yeah.
And there are, like I said, they're currently being worked on, but if you go to the GitHub,
yeah,
and then go to parsers, and in this case, the network session one,
yeah,
parsers, and there are some parsers over here which aren't yet in Sentinel because it's the same with detections. Every once in a while, they get pulled from the GitHub to Sentinel.
Yeah.
And if you go to ASIM network session, you have the big blue deploy button over here.
Yeah.
And also, if you go to the ARM templates, the ARM templates, and you open one, you have the blue button over here. So that's a way where you can deploy all of them at once.
And I believe if you go into Sentinel, maybe into another tab, if you go to the solution page. Content hub.
Yeah.
If you go to Content Hub and just enter Cisco, I remember seeing that today, and you just select any of them, you will of course see, that with that solution pack, you will probably also get a parser, and that means that most likely, I'm pretty sure that if you were now to install that solution, you basically also get an ASIM parser.
Yeah, so for some of those, the parsers are there already. For instance, the ASA one is not there yet. So one of the items on my list to create is also an ASA connector, so that it will be added over here.
Yeah.
And then if you install it, then it will, in the end it will appear. So that's the ASIM part. And besides ASIM, there is also a part called IM. And those are the filtered ones. So let me just refresh. It should be. When we go to, for instance, this is the one for FortiGate. And if you look over here, you already have some values. So for instance, if we do has any IP either has any prefix. Let's make it 10.10.10. So like this. Double quotes. Okay, so this one was broken. Yeah. So let's go to my pull request. Install. It's changed. Should be an easy way to do this, but
So you figured out it was broken and basically provided a correction, right?
no, I built the whole parser.
Okay.
So in the end, the parser itself, it's like it's a big KQL.
Yeah.
So in the end, what you do is you create for instance, I created a table over here, which I mapped the device action to the DVC action and the event results and the event result details. But we're kind of jumping from the parsing, extracting to the ASIM, but that's okay. So let's see, ASIM network sessions. Oops. So over here we have the network session normalization schema. And the thing is, it started with OSAM. That's a normalization schema, which was initiated also by Roberto Rodriguez. And the team took it further to map everything to ASIM. What it is with ASIM, you have some the filtering parameters. So over here you have the parameters where you can search for. So for the network sessions, you can search by times, by IP addresses, port number, host name, action, and event result. And this is an example how you can filter. So you can filter where the host name has any of the Tor proxies. And then it will search over all your data. But when you look down a bit over here, you have the fields. And the fields can be mandatory, optional, or recommended. And the idea is to map as many of you have to map the mandatories and as much of the recommended and also, if possible, the optionals.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, if I would have, 3 tables that all contain IP addresses, and instead of, creating a query where I say, search for an IP address in table 1, 2, 3, I basically have to say same thing. And if I take the top level one, it will automatically crawl through all these sub ASIMs that I have created, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have some schemas for DNS, DHCP, file events, network process registry, and users, and web sessions.
Yeah.
And then you can attach your own ASIMs to that. So I added the Fortinet one, and then will be worked on the WatchGuard and maybe the Cisco, and you can match all things. And because so now we have a schema.
If I have clients that are coming in through Defender, and I'm forwarding my Defender registry events into Sentinel, but I still might have some systems that are not onboarded in Defender for Endpoint, but I'm doing basically maybe event logging, and I'm logging the registry changes. I can still, I with ASIM, I have a common ground for basically searching, give me any machines back where HP local machine, blah, blah, blah was changed. And regardless of where, the original data source was, ASIM is going to help me to kind of normalize that, right?
Yeah, so for instance, you have for registry, you can use Sysmon. Yeah. So then you have 2 sources, the Sysmon one and the Defender one. Then you can search for your keys. That way you can correlate data and quickly on. So for
that is actually, I think, quite a cool idea, and maybe also an argument for those people that are, let's call it, reluctant because of their old investments that they have in maybe their, old school queries, maybe to make their queries, instead of telling them, well, you would have to transform them in KQL to, let's say, the vendor type of style, you could actually take the approach where you basically create your detection queries based on this ASIM, right? And then you don't care in what way your systems are delivering the data. Yeah. Okay.
So
Very cool.
In the end, the parser is just a bit of metadata to define what it is, and then you have your KQL, because this is all KQL. I'm mapping the protocol number to the protocol name.
Now, just curious, playing a little bit the dumb user here, in terms of performance, I mean, if you could have a ball of glass, do you think that when this ASIM thing, becomes standard, that instead of writing my analytic rules, should I still go directly after, let's say, Office activity or Azure activity or that kind of things, or will we end up rather targeting the ASIM? I mean, if you look today at the analytic rules, some of them, like where we have, those ransomware IP addresses, you still see that the majority of those analytic rules, basically in the top, we see the let statements where it defines the arrays with IP addresses. And then we see, this iteration where basically it goes through all those, different potential tables in which we have IP addresses, right?
Yeah. So what I think, there can be two options. You have the ASIM, because then it doesn't matter how you get your data into the table, you can still map it and still query it. Then the other option would be with the data transformation, but then you're touching your data in a way where you're not sure what's the original. That can be an issue for some people. And then the third one was iterating in your queries. But I think if we enter all the data sources as ASIM, then you can quickly query, create detections, hunt, because you have the filtering goes over here. In the end, a let statement, of course, is a function. So I have all the query, all the filter parameters over here.
Yeah.
And then in the end, over here, in the end, I run the parser with all the options. So if you enter one from your query, it will automatically pick it up and use it as a filter. So that way you can quickly, because sometimes you have a host name which is from an IOC, or you see an attack and you want to quickly see of your whole state of your whole environment. Did someone touch that IP address or that host name? And then ASIM is a really cool way, because you have over here in the network session part. It's not the best to show. Let's see now, network session. It doesn't show it that well. In the normal file, you have a multi-line representation of all the parsers which it's calling out for. This one. So at the moment, we had these all combined. And as soon as someone adds a new one, WatchGuard, Cisco ASA, you can add it here. And you can also, for your own environment, you can add your own custom ASIMs. But it's better to upload them on GitHub and share them.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, and I wanted to show, because over here we had the deny or allow in the extract form. And you can also just do a simple if statement that if it contains allow, then allow, and if it contains deny. If it doesn't contain allow, then it will deny. So
Yeah.
that would be a last option for the filtering.
Okay, cool. I also believe I just found a reason what could be problematic if we actually create our analytic rules, at least the templates, through ASIM, because right now, Johnny, if you can quickly maybe go to the analytic rules. And go to the templates and just search for this, Radium IP, for example. Yeah, one below. Yeah. Here, and if you go scroll up a little bit, which of course is up. Up. So you see the tables that it's actually using. It's actually indicating the tables that the query is touching, and it's also indicating the tables that you actually have active. And I guess if you will just, create your query instead of looping, if you go down to the query now, this is what I meant before. Here you see these variables, and then basically what's happening below, it's that he's just going through all those sources individually, right? Yeah. Now, my crazy thinking is, okay, I could save quite some lines of code, because I could just, take my variables that I define, and instead of hard coding and looping through all those tables, if I'm just looking for an IP address, I could basically use an ASIM table, right? But at the same time, I will probably lose the ability that I actually am clear in my analytic rule to the end user which the specific data tables are being used, because I'm basically saying, okay, this rule will go over any ASIM network table, right?
Yeah, so let's see if we can add a SIM network session 10. Not sure if I roll a return. Okay, so that will return something, and that's from the Windows firewall log. Okay, cool. So we have some network data over here. So let's create a detection. And let's run it every we can run it every 5 minutes. And let's see how it comes out. So we go to
So what did you now define as a detection rule?
just the ASIM parser, so all the network sessions, and I just took 10 events, so every 5 minutes this one will trigger.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we don't. You only see the connectors from the rule templates, and not from the detection itself once you created it.
Yeah.
But if we look here, do we have something related to ASIM? We have. Oh, but okay. Just the.
You're looking for what?
to see if it also does show the connectors related, but it doesn't show it yet.
No, but I would say you kind of know by the table names usually where they come from.
Yeah, but I think it would be nice if they would add it, because now you have the, network session, but you don't know which connectors are related, because maybe there isn't a, I don't know, a WatchGuard connector yet, or the ASIM parser isn't there yet, so you wouldn't know which data tables were related to this specific detection.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
But let me just kill my newly created test rule. Delete. So let's see, did it trigger? Probably did. Yeah.
No.
In this case, we have an alert. Cool.
If you look at the events it produce, so what type of events it produce? If you just go into the details, yeah. Again, on the left. Okay. Yeah.
So you can also use this to create detections if you combine it with your threat intelligence, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
You can also use that. And you link your threat intel to the ASIM, and from the ASIM over your products.
Yeah, which, if we now look at the TI map analytic rules that we have out of the box, right?
Yeah.
Maybe let's go there. And right now, we have a lot of TI map rules. Basically, I would say we have a rule. Just search for TI map; it will come up. And right now you have a TI map for office activity. You have a TI map for signing logs.
Yeah.
Question there is the same. Could those be consolidated? But then also the question is about performance, right? That's something I would be interesting to compare as well. Because I imagine that if I take off, let's call it the root ASIM table, or is it basically a view? It will automatically take all sub SIMs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe that's not always wanted. Yeah. Because I can imagine that if I take the root, let's call it table network, it will run queries across all those tables.
Yeah. But then you have the ASIM network session, but you can also do ASIM network session Azure firewall, for instance.
Yeah. Can I also exclude? So can I say ASIM network session? But if under ASIM network session, I have 4 subtables that I basically say, well, in this specific case, use ASIM network session, except that one.
It might. Let's see how it's called.
Doesn't look like.
As if you do. But now, how can we? No. No,
Yeah. Okay.
you can.
Never mind. Just play.
There is a disable operator, a disable variable. So in the end, it should be possible, but I'm not sure if you do it from there, how it's.
Okay, cool. Well, I believe definitely something to look into.
Yes. So that's I've been playing around with this month. I believe you still wanted to show something about browser extensions.
Yeah. So for that, I'm gonna be super lazy and just walk you through my blog post. So you might have heard the news that Microsoft now launched this Microsoft Defender threat and vulnerability management. Let's call it an add-on. You would use on top of Defender for Endpoint P2. And what we basically have here is vulnerability management. Then you have inventories. And in addition to the application, we now also have browser extensions and certificate inventory. Now I enabled the trial, which is available to everyone. Now that's cool because browser extensions, in my view, is something that maybe people didn't look too much at, while we're good at locking down clients and removing local admin rights. Unless people were already applying policies to actually also manage the behavior of what users can do with extensions or not. But I would say for the majority of the customers where I had the opportunity to actually look into their existing browser extension inventory, I guess the answer was no. Nobody really paid, attention or was concerned about what users install. But actually we should, because if just in my little demo environment, if we look at LastPass, if we look at the permissions, there are quite some permissions here, right? And if an application is allowed to turn on my camera, turn on my microphone, if that application is allowed to basically do something with any web page, that is, I would say, a high level of permissions, because maybe if that extension gets taken over from the developer, or maybe he sold it to someone with bad intentions, and if that browser extension is actually to allow to store any volume of data, or to maybe replace the scripts that make up the extension, then suddenly that extension might be able to do things that we do not want them to do. So as you can see, we get quite some visibility over that. So first of all, what is a browser extension? I guess for the audience here, that's clear. It's those little tools that I have above here that I installed from the Google Chrome, Firefox, or Edge store. Where are they stored? On your local disk somewhere here. Then we have those permissions. They're actually defined, at least for Chrome and for Edge Chromium. They're defined in a manifest JSON file. So here we see that. These are basically the API Chrome API references. And what basically Microsoft does for us in the UI here. They're translating those things for us. So if you're curious, you can take a look at the documentation here. So yeah, back to KQL. If I have that, of course, I can work with the UI and I can filter as always. But again, I can also look at that through KQL. So quite easy. First of all, device file events. If I wanted to, if I hadn't this add-on yet, but or let's just say, if I'm just curious about who's actually downloading and potentially installing extensions, at least for Chromium and Edge, the file extension will be CRX. So I can see those type of file activities where the file extension is CRX, as we can see here. And of course, that long number that we know, which is the unique ID that refers to the extension. And now that we have browser extension inventory in Microsoft Defender, as we can see here, this screenshot was taken from a live environment, for Microsoft Edge 125 extension, Google Chrome 398 extension. So yeah, there was everything, from possibly legit productive software to maybe things you don't want to really see on a corporate desktop. So this is what I mentioned. This is the manifest JSON files, and it says, okay, notifications, idle, unlimited storage. So that means that, we allow the extension to not use the default, I believe, of 10 megabytes, but, it can ask for as much storage as it needs, etc. Context menu, it allows to integrate with your menus. Idle, it can detect whether your system is idle or not. So those permissions are all related to Chromium APIs. Good. So I've got information here. And now the KQL fun starts. So if I wanted to do some querying over the data, I can either, show me all browser extensions by installed versus actually activated. So that's one thing. That's something, MDE TBM will review for us. Or if I'm specifically after some specific permissions that are of concern, show me all extensions that have the proxy permissions. So typically, these will be extensions that provide VPN capabilities, etc. So yeah, no rocket science. It's basically, again, permission descriptions. We don't even have to parse any additional data or something like that, because the tables are pretty clear. If we look here in advanced hunting, let me quickly finish this before I'm going to switch over. So proxy extensions we see here, and then the rest of the article basically talks about how we can control the installation and use by means of group policy. So this has nothing to do with KQL. So yeah, if we go down here, we're basically talking about this table, where I have my browser extension, and we're talking about the browser extension KB, where I get more information, about the permission level and the risk of the extension, and whether the permission is actually required, yes or no. Yeah. So yeah, that's something we've been actively using for one or two customers now, and as we start. At the same time, now that Internet Explorer is dead, this is really the moment where the last warriors of Internet Explorer are now gone, and we're actively making Edge the default browser, the active browser. And at the same time, we're also trying to get control over the extensions they're being using. And again, KQL can help us here if we don't want to browse through the UI within Defender for endpoint. Yeah. Good.
Cool.
Yeah, sometimes the beauty lays in the simplicity.
True.
Yeah. Which hopefully also will encourage people, that maybe are still shy when it comes to KQL, like, oh, I cannot do that. As you can see, there's just one table, filter it by something. You can even filter it through the UI, and it will maybe help you to get the data out that you want.
Good stuff.
Okay, so even without our guests, we managed to talk for 2 hours.
Yeah.
You even talked longer as we promised the audience, but and we see there's actually 2 people left over. So thanks, Jörg, for hanging out with us. Thanks, Marco. And thanks for all those that will be listening to the recording later on YouTube. So yeah, next month, there's going to be a break. We hope you all enjoy the summertime. And we plan to be back in July. And a little spoiler, in September, we are going to host the Workplace Ninja event here in Switzerland, Lucerne. And actually, if you'd like to come along and meet Johnny and myself in person, it's, by the way, also something we should slowly start preparing.
Yeah.
We'll be running, a session on KQL. Actually, Johnny is running 2 sessions. And there's going to be much more interesting speakers there. So let me quickly post the URL here. In the Teams chat. Where are you? Here. Yeah, there we go. Exactly. That's the event that few friends are organizing from all over Europe. And after 2 years being live online, we now decided to take the chance, and we really noticed that people are really looking forward to meet in person. I also noticed this today. During the last 2 days, I was given the opportunity through Microsoft to run the Defender days for Microsoft partners. So talking about Microsoft Defender, Sentinel, etc. And everybody who registered did actually show up in person. So that was a crowded house, and totally different experience than running your workshops or your presentations just alone at home in a team session. Yeah, so seats are almost all booked. So again, if you're around in Europe, if it doesn't make you travel too far, have a look at our agenda. We have an awesome list of speakers. And come along. Any closing words from your side?
No, next time will be shorter.
Okay, good. Have a good one, everyone, and thank you for hanging out with us. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.